Good afternoon, morning. Thank you so much for having me. I am from here in Dublin, living in Houston, which is a super random place for a girl from Artane to be living. I do want to share with you the journey that my husband and I went on, and how, not so much how we ended up in Houston, but just how things kind of progressed once we got there. And I love that I'm coming right, well, I hate that I'm coming right after you because that was incredible. Thank you so much. And such a rich insight into just such wisdom that you carry. So thank you so much. And I feel like actually when you were speaking, I was like, wow, what I'm going to share with you about are stories that are kind of the outworking of what you have shared about. And so you're sharing the roots and the whys, and I'm fast forwarding a good number of years and saying this is what it looks like now. And obviously we're in the States, but so much of the heart of what we do, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. It's the same. And like you mentioned as well, just the identity that we're given from God as we're born, and given the image of God when we're born, obviously is global. And so we want to see people live fully in who they were created to be. So Josh and I went to high school in Rathgar and had 3 children here. Did you go there as well? But I'm from the north side. But I had 3 children here in Dublin, and then it was a lot of circumstances moved us to Houston, and we didn't really know why we were there, didn't really know how long we would be there. And we were there quite a short time, and we're volunteering downtown, because here in Dublin we had been doing youth ministry. So we had worked in what was called FBC then, now it's called Trinity Church. And so we were the youth leaders there for a good number of years, and that's obviously right in town. And so had done some time working in the inner city. And when we got to Houston, we started volunteering with our friends who were working with the homeless. And so we ended up in situations, this is 7 more, we ended up being in low-income neighborhoods and working with homeless people. And so this is not an uncommon sight in Dublin, it's just that it's much warmer there to sleep on the streets and not quite as wet. But the homeless crisis in Houston is absolutely just horrific. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing. So we would be in these situations and volunteering with our friends who worked with the homeless. And we were down there one day feeding the homeless, and I was probably from here and over where Lisa is, there was a chair, and people were kind of feeding the homeless, and I looked over and I thought, well, someone has left what I thought at the time was their dog or a puppy or something. And so I went over and kind of unwrapped it, and as I lifted it I realized it was not a dog, it was a little human. And so I started to kind of freak out, like someone had left their baby there. Later we found out what the real issues were, but what I saw at the time was a little 3-month-old that looked like someone had gotten a cheese grater and just kind of taken most of his skin off. And he smelled like death, just really smelled like death. And I found out later that was scabies, and there was mold, and there was just a lot of kind of health issues going on. And I went across the road to Walgreens, like kind of Boots chemist, to buy something to clean him up and everything. And the people who were there were saying to the mum that we found a little bit later, saying to her, we're going to have to call Child Protective Services, you can't leave with this child. And she said, well, what about the lady with the funny accent? She seemed really nice. That was me with the funny accent. She seemed really nice. Could she maybe take him? Because his mum had grown up herself in the foster care system and grown up in a very kind of difficult situation. And she didn't want him in the foster care system. And it's kind of it's very different to here. It's difficult to explain the whole thing, but really she is able to ask anybody to babysit her child. And so she was asking me, this isn't him, but she was asking me if I would basically babysit him for a couple of months. And so I came back over and they asked me that, and I rang Josh. We had at home like a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old, kind of around those ages. And I'm ringing Josh going, we've been in America about a month, and we had no baby stuff, so we didn't bring any baby stuff with us. And so I'm like, well, there's a baby, and he has a nappy on, and it has mold in it, and he has a soother, and it has mold in it, and can I bring him home? And he was just like, okay, well. So, he's coming from a situation like this, and so living in and out of kind of homes and on the street and this kind of thing, to suddenly, this little child is being brought to our house and from the choice of his mother. And so he's a little bit older here, but he also, you can see here, his first year, he was actually, his neck was all the way over this way, because the reason he had mold growing on his body was because his mum genuinely believed that if you pick up a baby, it spoils them. And so she didn't pick him up out of the car seat or didn't move him around. And so this muscle elongated and this one shortened. And so his first year, he was like this a lot. He's fantastic now and has no physical issues or anything. But the reason I kind of want to tell you that story is he's going to play for Ireland. Not today, but now, I'm sure some people are following it on their phones, Richard Carson. But I want to just tell you a little bit about what kind of happened after that, because we took him into our home and thought it was maybe going to be for a couple of months. And then after a couple of months, his mum, I was back downtown, and his mum said, hey, by the way, do you know that baby that I gave you? As if I would have forgotten the baby that you gave me. And I said, yes. And she said, listen, I actually don't want him. You can just adopt him. And I was like, okay. So that kind of started us on this road of adoption and, licensing and all that kind of stuff. But it also threw us into a new understanding of kind of the underworld of Houston and what was going on racially and socioeconomically, and just trying to understand the cycles that his biological mum had come through. And so, as well as walking with him into a new season, we were also walking with her and trying to kind of walk her into a fresh season in her life. And that's been, back and forth for many years. Isaiah is actually, his name is Isaiah, is now 14 and really flourishing and doing amazingly. But what we realized very quickly was that people who are living in hard situations, and it's here as well, obviously, are walking in and out of the prison system, very much so in Houston, in and out, in and out. And we were going to visit some of our homeless friends. We started working with the homeless. We were going into jails and into prisons to visit them because they were sober when they were in prison. And so we were chatting with them, and they were the ones who told us. We said, why are you kind of going in and out? What is it that's making you want to kind of live here rather than, gain gainful employment and start a new life and stuff? And they said, well, when we get out, they drop us in Houston, in the middle of Houston, and straight away, all the people who we were kind of involved with are right there to meet us. And so this is, it's hard to explain. I'm going to show you pictures. But when you get out of prison in Houston, or in Texas actually, they're all brought to this one place, and it takes a long time, and they bring them outside in their prison clothes. So it's not like in the movies where they put back on the suit they went into prison in, or whatever. They throw away all their clothes. So they come out in their prison clothes. They have prison shoes on, which honestly, we cannot even donate prison shoes to homeless people. They won't wear them because of the stigma that goes with it. So they have their prison clothes on, they have prison shoes, and they have this red bag that we'll get to in a minute. It's a net bag. It looks like a potato sack. And everything they own is in the red bag. And so they get to the middle of Houston, and it's like dropping them at Connolly Station or somewhere down there. And outside waiting for them are pimps and drug dealers and traffickers for the men and women. Women are also there. And they're waiting for them to, everyone who gets out of prison has $50 in their pocket. And so they're waiting for them to take the $50, to offer them drugs, to offer them a job. For the women, they're offering them places to stay, jobs, and they're caught right back up into those cycles. And so we were like, I wonder if we went down there, would we know when it was them getting out? And so we went down there one day and realized very quickly, right away when they get out, because there's 50, there's about 70 or 80 who are released, and some go other places. But in Houston, we get like 40 to 50 a day. And so they get out and they kind of stream out, and they're literally engulfed by people when they come out. So we just had a sense that God was saying, instead of them being met by traffickers and pimps and drug dealers and everything, those cycles that they kind of are back into, that they should be met by the kingdom of God, that they should be met by someone speaking over them, the identity that God created them for. And for many of them, it is the first time. It's the first time that they've had a kind human interaction for a very long time. And so we started going down there to meet with them. So there's 20,000 released every year. We get about 10 to 12,000 of them. 55% of them go back to prison. So the recidivism rate is very, very high. But the statistics show that if they are met and followed up for even just 2 weeks, those statistics can go down into like about 8 or 9%. And so it's kind of a hard statistic to really find out about, but it drops radically if they have a community around them. And just like you were saying, if we will take ownership of other people's walk and their journey in life, we can break these cycles. So, and 70% of their children will follow in their footsteps. That is a horrendous number. There's 2.3 million people in prison in the United States at the moment, and 70% of their children will follow in their footsteps. And it costs about $21,000 a year to keep one of them. So they get onto this Greyhound bus, which you've probably seen on movies, and they come down. There they are with their red potato sacks, and they get off the bus, and we switch out this bag for this bag here. And these are the shoes they wear. And if you think about this, when the women get out of prison, they have everything they own in that bag. So they've got everything. They've got their tampons, they've got their underwear. They don't know what is coming next in their life. So often, a lot of the people that we meet, they have rolls of toilet roll in that bag. They have ramen noodles in the bag. They have everything they own because they really don't know what's happening next. So we get men, and this is amazing. On the bottom of their shoes, if you work in prison, this is on the bottom of your shoe. That says offender. And so this is the shoes that often they're released in, and they have to go, and they're going often to get jobs in work sites and building sites. And when they walk on the work site and the building site, that's what follows them. And these are the women. So, this is like a red flag for a trafficker. So they just are walking around the center of Houston, and they're offered, and we've seen it happen. We know who the traffickers are, and we call the helpline, and the police will come down. But they'll just kind of wander over to them and start asking them, do you need a job? Do you need a place to stay? What's next for you? Really kind and stuff. And actually, sadly, there's women who are with them who will say, I'm with this guy, so I must be safe. And, I'm a woman and you're a woman. And so, we can do this together. And you're just kind of looking in her eyes thinking, gosh, you're also trapped. It's a really, really hard situation for them. So that's my husband, Josh. So we'll walk them across the street and talk with them. And we give them hygiene, we give them socks, we give them lots and lots of practical things. The most important thing that we give them is a wristband. There's a wristband with a helpline number on it. And so, like was mentioned, we're kind of a bridge to next steps. And so there are there is help in the city. There is some kind of government help that is a little bit iffy, but there are a lot of organizations that want to help them in their next steps. The gap between this moment and finding those next steps is absolutely massive. It's hard for them to fill out the forms. It's hard for them to find places to go. And in a sense, they've lost a sense of who they really are. If any of you in here were defined by the worst decision that you've made in your life, what would that look like for you? If you think about one of the worst decisions that you've made in your life, if that followed you for the rest of your life and was kind of spoken over you and it became your identity, what would that look like for you? And that is what it's like for them. And they will come out, and we'll have guys who have been in, I had a guy recently who had been in 45 years. And so if any of you have seen Shawshank Redemption, it's very like that situation. He comes out after 45 years. He doesn't know anything. Obviously, he doesn't have to be in 45 years to not know what an iPhone is. He doesn't know about the public transport system. He doesn't know where he's going to go. We were able to find, he didn't know, he was literally standing in the middle of Houston with nowhere to go and no connection and no family. And we were able to find his son in Louisiana, who was 45 years old. So they had never met each other. And he thought that his dad would die in prison. And it was a lot of kind of working and connections and stuff. But we found him, and the son drove from Louisiana. The dad was called Clem. The son was Clem Jr. So Clem Jr. drove from Louisiana to meet his son. And they had just an incredible reunion. And then they came back to talk with us the next week just to kind of thank us and everything. And he was living with his son. And Clem said, I said to him, what's the weirdest thing about being out? And we were out to dinner. And he said that you're buying me dinner. Because he's an African-American man. He's been in prison for 45 years. And I was buying him dinner. And I was a white woman. And so, and then he started crying and he said, I have grandchildren and they call me Papa. And I just, it's so amazing. We have so many older men like that. We also get the younger guys who are coming out and they're caught up in gang activity. We try to provide them with shoes as well. So we have these younger guys caught up in gang activity who I know is a worldwide situation. You grow up in an impoverished situation. All you know is trauma. All you know is stress. All you know is that your community, when you get to about 14 or 15, your main community are the guys who are going to be your family, who's going to be the gang that you're going to walk with. And you get to about 17 years old, and then you're legally held accountable for what you've been brought up in. And these guys, this is not, it's such a hard thing to reconcile because there is the tension between people who, you commit a crime, there has to be some kind of punishment for that crime. But one of the questions that we're always thinking about is, what is justice? What is justice for these people? What is justice for a young boy who grows up, for example, somebody like Isaiah, who was born into a situation where everything around them says, you're worth nothing. You will be nothing. You won't finish school. The schooling system is very different in Texas anyway, where the taxes in the area that you live in pay for the kind of school that you go to. And so if you live in a really nice area, then you have a really nice school, and you have to go in that area. If you don't live in a good area, if you live in a low-income area, you have a low-income school. It isn't the same. And people will tell you, oh, everybody has the same opportunity. 100% they don't have the same opportunities. We have a little boy that has been back and forth with our family for a good few years called Jabari. And he is honestly one of the most intelligent little boys I have ever met. Spoke really early. And, his mom is living in the 3rd Ward, which is a very poor area in Houston. And she's, trying to keep it together, and we take him into our house every now and again. And Jabari is in a horrendous school. His opportunity to succeed is not the same as the opportunity that our children have in the schools that they're in. And so I'm watching his life play out while trying to kind of walk with him as well, and watching his life play out on the way to this, even though he has an amazing little mind and every opportunity could be given to him. And what I think about is, what is justice? So when someone commits a crime, but they have been kind of formed in a criminal activity world, what is justice for them? Now, if we, as the body of Christ, if we believe, and I love that you were kind of touching on the same things, if we believe that if there is good and there is bad, and the good people have good things happen to them, and the bad people have bad things happen to them, and that God looks at us and he says, well, you're good and you're bad and you're in and you're out, well, we're going to translate that down to these people as well. We're going to say, well, they're bad. I mean, they've done bad things, and so they deserve to have some bad things happen to them. And it would be a whole day if we wanted to talk about how bad the criminal justice system is in the United States and how they're treated, really worse than animals. In Texas, there is no air conditioning in prison. And it can be like 45 degrees, no air conditioning, and no kind of free flow air. It's really horrendous. But if as the church, and we really challenge people about this, if as the church we believe that there is good and that there is bad, then we'll say, hey, lock them up, throw away the key. But if we really believe that that everyone is created in the image of God, that everybody has an identity that has been given to them by God, and that these people, their identity has been, in a sense, it hasn't been stolen because it's still there. I ask them when they get out of prison, what did you want to be when you were little? What did you want to be when you were 6 and 7 and 10? And so many of them wanted to be like a basketball player, or many of them wanted to be a policeman, which is kind of ironic. But suddenly now, their identity, I don't say it's been stolen, it has been rearranged by the circumstances that they've been living in. And now their identity is that very wrong thing or whatever it is they did. If we believe that God, like we all believe about ourselves, I think Anne said it at the start, if we're on a journey with God, and we are people who journey with God, and God sees us as people on a journey with him, should we not see other people around us as being on a journey as well? And not in a sense of like, you're bad, I'm good, you're wrong, I'm right. And so with these people, we challenge the church in our area, should you not journey with these people in the same way as the Lord journeys with you? Should you not walk with these people and see them as God sees them? They have been broken from way before they broke the law. And so they're broken in the foster care system. They're broken in gangs. They're using drugs. They're in these bad schools. And so what is real justice for these guys who get out? And actually this is one of the girls, that's a trafficker there on the right. And this girl, we talked with her for probably an hour and a half, and she just chose to go with him. It was a really difficult day for us. But what is justice for them? And, you know, the 13th Amendment in the United States was the abolition of slavery. But in the 13th Amendment, some of you have maybe watched the Netflix documentary about that, slavery was abolished except as a punishment for crime. And so slavery was not actually completely abolished in the United States. It was abolished except for if you were a prisoner. And so it's amazing what happened when slavery was abolished, and you look at the statistics of African American people going into prison after that, because where were all the slaves gone? So they had to find some slaves for themselves, and so they started arresting people for crimes that really weren't even crimes before that. And a really basic example of that is that if you are caught using crack cocaine, or you have, well, let's say cocaine first. So cocaine is more of a rich person's drug. And so if you're caught using cocaine, it's about a 5-year minimum. If you're caught using crack cocaine, it's a 15-year minimum. 15 years, and that's because you're poor, and most likely it's because you're African American. I'm not going to throw tons of stats at you, but this is an incredible, I don't know if you know this, 97% of Americans in prison, so there's 2.3 million people in prison, 97% of them never received a trial. Unbelievable. 97, I went all over the place. I was like, there's no way that's true. 97%. And that is because they go into they go into prison they go into jail. They don't have the money for bail. And so they sit in jail and then they're offered a plea bargain. And so what they're told is, if you say you did it, you will get about 4 or 5 years. But if you don't say you did it and you go to trial, you might get 20 years. Now, that's not true. They might not get 20 years and they may have been innocent. But if you're uneducated and you don't have a lawyer and you're worried about your children at home because they're not being fed, well, you're going to take the plea bargain. And so we have all these people sitting in prisons all over America costing so much money that never received a trial. So here's the deal, is that we call it 7 more. Our ministry is called 7 more. Instagram is 7 more stories. Because in Matthew 18, Jesus says to forgive 70 times, 7 times. And so that is boundless forgiveness. And so we see these people, we want to, as they walk out, we want to say, I see you. I hear you. I see who you always were created to be. I see the potential in you. I see what's next for you. And it was born in us and out of us from this situation with our son Isaiah, because we saw him. And we still see the potential in him, but we also see where he could have gone to. And the cycle of poverty that his birth mom was caught up in, and the cycle of poverty that millions and millions of people are in. And it has challenged our faith. It's challenged us to try to understand how God sees people, and that idea of what is justice? What does justice look like for children growing up in poverty? What does justice look like for people who are struggling with mental health, who are held accountable for a crime that they did because of their mental health? Not because of evil in them, not because of, that they wanted to hurt somebody. I heard a judge say recently, it was so amazing. I heard a judge say that, I heard a judge say recently that what's really hard for her is that when she's sentencing, a lot of the people she's sentencing, that many of them could have also been the victim. And so they're both coming from the same neighborhood, and this kid could have been the victim, and she's sentencing him to go into a prison system that will make him more of a victim, and his children will follow after him. And so what I want to kind of end with is, what is our role, all of us, in speaking identity back over people? No matter whether they're, incarcerated or whether they're living in poverty, or for any of us with each other, do we see each other in who we were created to be? Do we see that, or do we see what's presented right to us? Do we see what we were brought up in? Do we see the image of God in each other? Just kind of to end, we had this one guy, Chris, who got out recently, and he just had a horrendous upbringing. Everything kind of went wrong in his life. And so we were able to kind of move him into a halfway house, and then from the halfway house to a job. And from the job, he was able to, save up enough money to get a car and this, and kind of all the way around. But all the way along, we were kind of engaging people from the church in his journey, even to the point of he needed every single one of his teeth pulled out and new teeth put in, and it was going to cost $50,000. And so we were able to get a dentist all the way down to $10,000, and he was able to pay for it himself with his job. But we were able to engage different people from churches all over the city in his journey. And I think it was such a beautiful picture of us as believers being able to say, where do I intersect with your journey? Where do I see you? And what can I offer? What do my gifts offer to you in your journey, and taking you to the next part of your journey, and not seeing people as you're good, you're bad, you deserve this. Because none of us deserve really what these people are getting. But we all deserve to be seen, to be known, and to be heard, and seen as who God created us to be. And so, let me just say, if you want to come volunteer with us, You're welcome to. But yeah, thank you so much for letting me share our story with you. And if you want to know more about it, 7 more stories on Instagram, and I'll be here to chat all day.